Good morning, everyone. We're so busy admitting people. Please, as you join us, drop your name, your organization and your country in the chat box so that we can see who's joining us. Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Okay. So I think in Tati, we're just waiting for Conrad to join.
Okay, Conrad just joined in, Sasha.
Wonderful.
I have joined.
Welcome, Conrad.
Hi there.
Welcome, Conrad.
Hola, Wumi. I cannot see you, but I can hear you. I recognize the voice. There we go.
Yeah, you can see her now.
Yes.
Wonderful.
You're looking good. You're looking well. Well, both of you are looking well. But
yeah, thank you. Organic all the way. Organic all the way.
Returning the compliments, Conrad.
How's it,
there
Conrad?
we go. Look at that. Gee, nobody's getting older. It's amazing. Yeah, nice to be.
I have a blue screen around me.
Yeah, I also have my background is very boring. I'm in my office, which is boring, which is also a bedroom, and it's also a guest room. And
well, I'm in a tent. I'm in a tent.
Cool. Anyway, I have a beautiful sunny day outside. I will definitely be going. I went for a walk at 5:30 this morning, and the sun was up, and the sun will be up at 10 o'clock tonight. The only good time in Germany is when it's summer. There's nothing more magical than having sunshine from 4 in the morning until 10 at night.
So I think we're going to be ready to start.
Okay.
It's 6 minutes into our time, and we've got quite a number of people who have joined, and we're expecting far more. There's been tremendous excitement. More people. We had 180 people register. As we know, there will be natural addition. These sessions are being recorded, so whoever hasn't been there from start can catch up. So I wish to welcome everybody. Thank you very much for your interest in this webinar series. We've been working hard at this for a few months, together with my colleagues Ntatise and Olawumi. We've been really putting our heads together to put an exciting program together. So my name is Sasha, and I'm the PGS National Coordinator in South Africa. I work very closely with Mother Body SAOSO, which is the organic sector body. And I've been working in this field for a while now, but what really propelled me in this field actually was the iFoam leadership course that I undertook with Conrad, who's one of our speakers today. That was just, really much the start of me becoming involved institutionally with the organic sector. And I've been, very dedicated to it all this time in supporting the sector, the PGS practice on the ground, and doing advocacy research around food systems on the continent. So Olawumi, as my co-facilitator for all these series, I would like you to please open your mic and introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Sasha. My name is Olawumi Benedict. I live in Ghana, though in Nigerian. I've been an organic farmer for the past 13 years and also a facilitator. I got into the organic field after I graduated, and I did a postgraduate diploma in organic. And that was a turning point for me. And then I was still farming, and I didn't step into the leadership
Thank you, Olawumi. And I also want to ask our colleague Ntatise to please open a mic and just let us know who she is, because Ntatise has been strongly involved in the organization of this webinar as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Ntati, part of the comms team for PGS SA, a great believer in organics and culture, and I'm happy to be part of this webinar. Excited to meet everyone. Thanks, Pastor.
Thank you, Ntatise, for all the great work you're doing. It's the first time PGS SA jointly with PGS Ghana is running a webinar, so we're very trepidatious with our technical skills being upgraded here. So I'm not going to talk about PGS and what it is, because you guys are all practitioners of PGS, and Audrey is going to be covering a fair ground on this. I just want to briefly, tell you why we're organizing this series. I think this is very much linked to the great demands that we as practitioners have seen in the field. PGSSA has been asked many times to actually present on our governance structure and how we do PGS. We follow a very decentralized model, which works well, which also has its shortcomings. And we've been in a reflective space with other PGS practitioners across the continent on this. And recently, Olawumi and I, we touched base and we were identifying similar issues with regards to the dynamics that are also prevailing in West Africa. And we thought, no, let's open up the space continent-wide and ask those questions. Now let's take a deep dive into those those operational issues that are coming to the fore, because we are seeing there's amazing appetite for PGS. It's not new, but I think there's more momentum of late with the EOAI initiative coming up, with a lot of funders interested in supporting grassroots organizations. So the question is, what implications are there with this great momentum in supporting PGS groups? Or is this being done in a sustainable fashion? Are the right principles being honored, and how in the practice are these groups, what are the challenges that they are being faced with? So we are now putting our heads together as practitioners to address those issues, and we've identified a couple of, we think, very relevant themes that are now, really, I think, taking the reflection to the next level. And these are the 6 themes that we will be engaging with on a bi-weekly basis up to the 2nd of August. Today, we will be talking about the challenges of knowing the fundamentals of PGS, which we thought was a very good departing point to set the scene of this series. We will then be looking at how these can be playing a role in shaping the growth of national organic sectors and organizations. We have a very interesting lineup for that series, for that session as well. The issue of sustainability will come is at the peak of this series. Intentionally slotted in the middle, because we would have laid the ground with a lot of elements around this in the 2 previous sessions, and we will be looking at sustainability from a financial operational perspective. We've been very interested in South Africa, but I know it's the case in other PGS groups as well, with tackling the issue of agro-processing. PGS in most instances is done for primary production, but there's great appetite for agro-processing. How do we go about this? And lastly, we will be looking at the nexus between PGS practices and other initiatives that seek to protect the integrity of production. And there will be, interesting themes. You will hear more about it closer to the time. So with no further ado, I want to basically, open today's session. Olawumi is my co-facilitator for all these sessions, but she's a speaker today as well. So that's why when you're a bit behind the scenes on the facilitation today. We will be starting with Audrey Wainwright, who's been leading the Cape Town PGS for a while and other PGS work in the past, and Audrey will introduce herself. And then we have Conrad Upfleisch from Starfish Organic, whom I also introduce as he presents, and then Olawumi will speak. Okay, so I think this is me, and Audrey, over to you.
Thank you, Sasha, and hello, everybody. Sasha, can you let me share my screen so that I can put my presentation up?
As panelists, you should have that, right?
Can you see anything?
It's starting to happen.
It's warming up.
Okay.
Yep, we can see it.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. The beautiful baobab tree. Just saying, Africa, we've got a lot of exciting and cathartic work to do on this continent. Wami, I wanted to put this picture. It's a pot that's at Sipiwe's home in Krugersdorp, and in 2020, the Ghana PGS approached Bryanston Market. They had some funding, and they were going to come for I think it was a 4 or 5 day trip to Johannesburg. And we had such a brilliant program lined up. You were going to come to the market, and we're going to show you our branding, our PGS branding, and our interaction with customers. I was going to show you the background of the documentation and storage and databases. And then we were going to do a farm visit together. And then the last day, we were going to all sit down around this pot, and Sipiwe is going to cook food from South Africa, and the Ghanaian PGS members would cook food from Ghana, and we would talk about food sovereignty. We would talk about how we're going to fix the food system. We would talk about like the importance of our soil and this planet. So I'm very happy to be here and to finally meet the members of Ghana PGS. So thank you for the invite. So Conrad, I don't know, this is everybody here has had some interaction with you. And I have to say that it was a brilliant moment in my life, because I started at Bryanston Organic Market in 2012. And in 2014, I went on the organic leadership course run by Conrad. We went to Sri Lanka for the opening. We did the series of webinars through the year. And then for our presentations, we went to India. And it was just completely eye-opening, and I was absolutely taken by PGS. Just briefly to introduce myself. So I was with Bryanston, and then I serve on the South African Bureau of Standards Technical Committee for Organic Agricultural Production and Processing. And then I'm also a PGS committee member of IFOAM. And I moved from Joburg to Cape Town, and now I'm at the Cape Town Oranjezig Market and working with not only the Cape Town PGS group, which is quite small at the moment, but also with other PGS groups in the province. So that's my little bit of background. But back to this training. So these principles, I think that I was looking for something that wasn't like autocratic. And it seemed to me that there is such a freedom that all of us as human beings can relate to these principles. So I'm going to go through them, not slowly, but I'm going to go through each of them, because I have found during my years of doing PGS that if you've got a problem in your group or a problem with anything, go back to the 6 basic elements, go back to the 10 key features. You'll find your problem there. You'll find the solution there, because as soon as you identify your problem, you'll find the solution. So I think that, again, one of the most important things for a sustainable PGS group, and often you will look at yourselves and think, why isn't it working? Why aren't we getting traction? Why aren't we moving forward? And it's so important that there is a pull and a push. The organic farmers need to have surplus and need to be ready for market to a certain extent. Doesn't matter if it's a small amount, but they need to have some kind of business structure where they are wanting to move their surplus into the markets. And customers are looking for assurance. Many customers in South Africa are not knowledgeable about organic agriculture. So there's a huge challenge for us to educate customers, and we use opportunities at marketplaces all the time to do that education. But if you've got those two things together, those needs, you've got your shared, you've got a need for to sell your surplus produce, and you've got a need for organic assurance, then that gives rise to this shared vision. I'll give you an example of a group member that didn't have the same shared vision as the rest of the group, and why that was challenging and how we worked through it. So we had a farmer who was not that interested in organic agriculture, but he was interested in supporting smallholder farmers, especially in township communities, looking at food security, never mind food sovereignty. And that was his passion. When we started moving toward doing the farm visits, we discovered that the farmers weren't quite ready, that one of them was using a chemical on the brassicas provided, of course, by the Department of Agriculture, and didn't see that as such a, I mean, I don't know that it wasn't an intentional thing, but he didn't look at that farm with enough focus. And so it was fine. We didn't approve, but we went through the process and explained how it worked. The farmers who were on that visit all shared how they worked and what natural methods they used to resolve the issue that this farmer had. So it wasn't an exclusive experience where then the farmer was excluded, but it did help me identify that if you have a member who's got a different shared vision, then there's something there to work a little bit differently on. Participation is absolutely fundamental. This is not a system where you can just, as a farmer, say, oh, I need a seal, let me go and join a PGS group. They can come to my place, check everything's fine, give me a certificate, and that's it. You need to participate in other farm visits, otherwise the PGS will not work. And I'll give you an example. One of the successful PGS groups in the Western Cape is Western Cape PGS, and they are completely farmer driven, and they all participate in their farm visits because they see the benefit of the seal and the certificate to be able to acknowledge that they are farming organically. And it's that participation that they have within their group of farmers that is so essential. So participation on farm visits. Then equally important is the participation on the development of the rules, your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, where you identify what standard you're going to use. When people develop processes and procedures themselves in a workshop together, they create ownership of that process. So again, if you've got a new member that's come in, they don't really understand the rules, the next thing you'll get a form and there will not be quite the understanding of what is required before an application is received. So it's very important for new members that come into your group to explain the structure and the processes of the group and how they work. And that participation, that's why at your AGM every year you review this, do we want to keep the standard? Are we happy with it? Are we happy with our processes? What about our consequences for non-compliance? We need them to know them up front. So the other aspect in terms of participation that's very important is the facilitating the farm visit. We call it being an administrator. That role in a variety of groups is rotated. And that's a brilliant way to also ensure that everybody participates in all aspects of the running of the group. Firstly, it makes the group resilient, so you're not dependent on one particular person. It's great because people learn excellent skills of communication, of writing, of capturing the amazing knowledge shares that happen on farm visits. So rotating those functions also really important that the group members participate in that aspect. Transparency. I can't tell you how customers love it when you say to them, no, you can come to the farm. And I've got a picture of a chicken tractor that's on one of the farmers in Tulbagh. On his farm. When customers come here, I say, no, there's the chicken tractor, have a look. And I show my cell phone. Do you want to come? Yeah, I'll put you on our database. We're going to go and visit him next year now. So that transparency, when you tell customers at markets that you're that open, they're very, very inspired. Not that they really always participate in the farm visits. It's still tricky to get customer participation, but at least it's an opportunity to build the customer awareness as well. And then the transparency is also between farmers. So the farmers get to see the operations of other farmers, and because they are the experts, they understand organic agriculture, they can really help to share and guide other farmers who are perhaps at a different stage in development. So that transparency, that farmers open their gates and they open the gates to other farmers and consumers, is really essential. I think this is I don't know, I've forgotten, it was a while ago. I don't know what that is. Conrad, you might recognize it. Okay, trust. So we know that the lobbyists for monopolies, for big business all over the world, they go into governments and they lobby for regulations that suit the big corporations that have the money to employ the lobbyists to develop things that are in their favor. So what have we got for smallholder farmers and small businesses? For me, this switch of saying, we are going to use something different here. We are going to use trust. We are going to, I think that in our society, in our world, we've forgotten how to use trust. We want to see the certificate, we want to see this paperwork, we look at the news and we believe all that. But when are we looking in the farmer's eyes and getting to know somebody and learning to behave in a trustworthy manner? That is the best way to learn to trust other people, is to behave in a trustworthy manner yourself. And it brings great satisfaction, that. The trust also develops, in all the work that we do in PGS, at the AGMs, at the farm visits, the interaction between the farmers and the consumers, not only in the developing the processes, but also in the farm visits. That interaction builds trust between people. I mean, in South Africa, as you all know, we have such diverse cultures, and we've got an incredibly unequal society. So people are coming from completely different economic backgrounds with different upbringings and different opportunities and different resources. And bringing all of those people together it's just really stunning to see the development of trust building up between people. I mean, I'll give you an example on a farm visit. There was a farmer, and he was a little bit cagey. We were going around on his farm visit, and then I thought, let me try and bring him out a little bit more. And I started chatting to him a little bit on a personal level. And then he stopped and he looked at me and he said, I will never, ever put a chemical in my mouth again. I have only a part of my intestine left, because he had some kind of cancer. So those sharing stories, those are personal accounts that people share, and also a way to build trust. When you use your instincts, if you doubt that there might be a trust issue, then you need to have more contact with that person. So these principles, when you find that there is something that's not completely aligned, it doesn't mean that you then exclude the person or the farm. It means that you need to find a way to bring that farmer in and to build that trust and to build that understanding. The learning process, of course, is the magic thing, the way that the farmers share knowledge on farm visits. And I think one of the very difficult things I find is to be able to capture in that conversation with 20 people on a farm visit, when, like, for instance, Tim Abar from Orange Farm, we were talking about moles and how this farmer had a agroforestry setup with banana leaves and then some medium like berry bushes and then artichokes at the bottom. So, doing chop and drop. And he was saying, it's working beautifully, but the moles are eating the roots of my artichokes. And then Tim spoke about putting a stick in the ground, cutting a Coke bottle and making little flaps on the side for the wind to catch the Coke bottle, because when you put it on the stick, the wind flaps it, and the vibrations of the Coke bottle on the stick disturb the moles underneath. So you need to try and capture that story, because ideally what PGS South Africa intend is all those little knowledge shares, they will go to a committee, a PGS South Africa a knowledge committee, to just confirm that the knowledge share is accurate, because that's very important, that we don't persist with perhaps information that's not accurate, but that you need to be able to capture that. And that's a challenging thing in a farm visit, but you get better at it. You get better at it. Yeah, there's Tim Abar in the bottom corner there. And then also, like, you know, understanding people, everybody's different food. I mean, we're lucky in this country that we are so diverse because we have the opportunity to learn about okra and eat it and understand the different tastes and flavors that come from different communities. And here's a picture, for example, of the seed pots in Guyana, where the seeds are dried. And in fact, Tim told me that on squashes, you wash them in cow's urine to get rid of any pathogens that might be on the seeds, and then dry them and then put them in the seed pot. So, you know, it's in a way to capture that kind of knowledge, very important. And then as a group, you know, always the more there are of us, you have more say in what you want to do. So things like seed exchanges, or things like training programs, or a compost making workshop. When you're a community, you have more power to be able to call on your sector for that kind of support. And again, you know, scientifically, I mean, I'm not a soil scientist. I'm just a human being with some HR experience in my past. And there's so much information out there, the technical information that we need to also understand. And what's lovely in PGS is we've got some soil scientists explaining what might be lacking in terms of the soil test on a farm. And then we've got farmers explaining, oh, I'm looking at that leaf and I can see you need lime, or whatever it might be. So also not underestimating the input that science and facts make. Then horizontality. You know, PGS groups are very, very dynamic. They're flat structures. They're not top down. And they adapt all the time, because all the time there are new members coming into your group. And so effectively, your PGS is like a living organism. And it's changing and it's adapting and it's growing. But at the end, you are all responsible, we are all responsible, and we are all accountable. And we're also not used to that. You know, we're used to employment relationships. We're used to hierarchical lifestyles. And here we have the opportunity to say, no, you know, it's me. I'm responsible and I'm accountable. I can stand up and say, yes, this is what we do, and I can stand behind it. So we are all responsible for the success of a PGS group. Briefly touching on the 10 key features, also really important. So it's the 6 basic elements and the 10 key features. And that's the glue that holds PGS together. So whenever you're feeling lost, go back and read those 6 basic elements and 10 key features. The first 4 are more enabling features. So again, just focus. If you're finding your group is losing focus or sight of its goals, you're serving grassroots organizations. It's suitable to smallholder agriculture, not huge, big hectares of monocropping. The principles of values in the community are ones that are aligned with organic agriculture, and that there are seed exchanges and logistics, sharing logistics for help to market. Sometimes when you've got seed suppliers and they're saying, no, you have to buy a minimum of 1,000 seeds, then you get together and take a group order. So all of those enabling aspects, things like that to remind yourself and look at them to guide your group. Then in terms of the more structural ones, so remember that you choose your own standard, and if you're going to create your own standard, which you can do, it needs to then be internationally recognized. So the participation, again, I remind you all that it's very important that people understand this. So if you've got new members and they don't know PGS so well, you need to go through the standard operating procedures. How did we come up with this standard? How do we know when to visit and how often we must visit a farm and who's got to be there? Those processes are documented in your standard operating procedures. How do you verify the farmer's complaint? It's the questionnaire. I know that we've got big challenges with paperwork, and I'm dying for the app where we can have the questionnaire on the app and the farmers can fill it out. And anyway, that's coming in the future, I believe. And then also your consequences, very important. I mean, in anywhere, if you know what is going to happen if you break this particular rule or you go in this direction, then when you do that, you're consciously making that call. So it's very important that those things are part of the group's knowledge and understanding, and also that they're involved in its development. And then we've got the Farmers Pledge, or dance or artwork that commits to organic agriculture and the principles of PGS, and then the seals or labels. So taking into account the 6 basic elements and then these 10 key features, hold all of those together when you're looking to assess the effectiveness of your group. Remember that as a farmer, if you're going to a market, a customer is quite entitled to believe you when you say, I am the farmer, I grew these organically. And the customer can say, I believe you or not. That is, we all as farmers or human beings free to be able to make that claim. Where the second party is the PGS part. And that's when there is one step between the farmer and the consumer, and that is the market. In order for that to be a successful relationship, markets need to connect the farmer and the consumer through seals and logos and stories. So I'll just give you a quick example. We have the brilliant, excellent eggs. It's a farm in Stanford. They have a participatory guarantee natural assurance logo. We don't use it commonly in South Africa anymore, but when we were developing in the early days, we used it for free range, because remember, we can't get organic certified feed in South Africa. We have to import feed without GMO from Zambia, and we're certainly not going to import certified organic feed further afield. So very challenging for our animal farmers. So we created this natural assurance logo. And when consumers come to me and they say, oh, what does this mean? Which eggs should I buy? They say. And then I tell them the story. I said, well, you know what this logo means? This means we've been to Terry's farm. We've seen the different pastures that she's got and how she rotates them. We know that we've seen the hospital for when chickens get sick and they get taken out of the system, so their eggs are not part of any harvesting of the eggs. And then we can talk about the work that Terry does in local township communities, teaching about animal welfare and the future of other farmers being able to use that logo and then bringing those eggs where there's a demand in Cape Town for these eggs, and then income goes back to the communities. So I promise you that most people want to do good, even the rich people. You would be surprised. So people really, really want to put their money where it can make a difference, and being able to talk to that seal is really, really important. Farmer Angus is another egg supplier that we've got, and it's an inherited farm, incredibly wealthy farm in South Africa. He gave his chicken business to his staff, and he sits on the board doing skills transfer. So remember that in organic agriculture, we look at social justice, we look at the inequality, and farmers doing projects like that I mean, consumers really, really love to hear that that's the work that we're doing on the ground. Oh, I'm finished. That was it. I just want to say, be patient. PGS takes a long time. It takes a long time to develop the rhythm of it. It takes a long time to iron out the areas that are not working, and also to prepare farmers. You know, it's a complex. Organic agriculture is not just about no chemicals and pesticides and chemical pesticides. It's very holistic. And so it takes time for all of us to be able to interpret that when we're on the farm and communicate that back to our consumers. I just want to leave you with the slide on the screen. Food sovereignty ensures the right to use and manage lands, territories, water, seed, livestock, and biodiversity are in the hands that produce food. So, you know, PGS has an enormous role in and I'm so excited to hear Sasha talk about increased interest in funding, because I think that, you know, PGS is a cathartic and an alternative way of thinking and being in the world, and looking at working in community and caring for each other and trusting each other. And I say we take over. That's me. Okay, let's have some questions. I'm happy to flick back and forward through the slides if you like.
So Audrey, thank you so much for this very inspiring talk, and I agree with you. It's very cathartic. It heals communities. It's about the human fabric and the food systems and how these are supposed to be human, animal-friendly systems. I just want to also share, like, you know, a brief little anecdote about how PGS by some is really judged as superseding third-party certification. I was working a bit with some huge third-party certified citrus growers in South Africa that called Silga Organics. And they were showing how on a visit to Spain, where they were visiting third-party certified orchards, orange and lemon trees there, they picked up on a lot of indications that these farmers were cheating, that they got their certification, but actually they could see that there were definite signs of conventional practice. You know, you can't cheat the eye of another farmer. And for me, that was very interesting because they get these third-party certifications, they can export all over the world, but actually they're cheating. And your best lies in picking up on this element of trust sits with the farmers, but also the eyes, the expert eyes, you know, the sector specific expertise eyes. So for me, that's also another compelling example of why PGS works. So we've got,
I think also, Sasha, just
yeah,
on that, you know, I think that it's also important. I mean, we're looking at a system that we're creating ground up, and we've had experience where farmers in our groups have not complied and have broken the rules, in fact. And we followed the procedure in the PGS standard operating procedures, which worked perfectly. And it was fair and it was respectful, and it had its result, which was that the farmer was no longer part of the PGS group. And I've been thinking so much about how that works, especially in small communities, perhaps not so much in the cities, when the PGS farmers are all living very close by to each other. And you can't, if you say that you're a community and one of your community members is not doing the thing that serves the big community, you can't just kick that person out. So how do you, I think PGS groups, you know, if you go to jail for, you've done something wrong and you go to jail for 1 year, when you come out, you've served your punishment. You should be able to go back into society and do good and have learned your lessons. So I think it's interesting that for me, there's a place where PGS needs to address that next level of issues that could get cropped up. Yeah.
Yes, very much so, the rehabilitation issue. So guys, this is in a webinar setup. If you want to ask a question, ideally, you would drop your question in the Q&A box. So you would do this by clicking on the more icon at the bottom right of your screen, and you can see Q&A there. You click there and you would type your question. So I went there, there's none yet, but I think I've picked up on a question from Anik in the chat box. Anik is asking, where can one get the standard for free range natural assurance for PGSSA? So I think you're the right person to answer this, Audrey.
Okay. As I said, it was an early logo, and there is, the Department of Agriculture do have some guidelines on free range. What we're referring to here when we use the natural assurance logo is that the farmer is complying with all the aspects of organic agriculture, except with regards to the feed. So it was Overberg PGS that issued that logo, and they've got a few, I think, animal farmers in their area. And it is not directly related. So it's the organic standard without the certified feed. And you know, most of the customers understand free range. Well, the chickens can get out and about. Well, it's not quite enough really, because I've been to a huge operation where the food is still in one of all of those channels, but they just open the doors. But chickens go where their food is. So, you know, mostly they stay indoors. So, you know, really we're focusing more on alignment with the standard with the free range process. But as I said, the only group that has that logo is Overberg. I know that PGS don't support using that logo anymore, and I also support not using it anymore. And can I tell you why? When we were developing the certification landscape, we consulted, and very important that PGS South Africa, when what they're doing, that they consult their members when they're developing particular things. So we went through a very good consultation process, even with IFOAM PGS committee as well. And Conrad, I think you were also involved. And I like the natural assurance, you know, logo. But one of our members said, Audrey, in Black culture, the word for organic is natural in English. So it is incredibly confusing to many of our farmers to say that something is natural, because the interpretation is that it's organic. And for that reason, I think it was a really good idea not to continue with that logo.
And I mean, that was a very important reason. And also, you know, we're wanting to make sure that anything that stands as organic PGS certified or organic in conversion is strictly aligned to the SAOSO standards. And the SAOSO standards do not make provision for natural assurance. So we agreed that was a gray area, that if a PGS wanted to develop any label for natural assurance, they would do with their own branding, but they would not use the national organic brand, because we wanted to make sure that there was robustness in anything that used the PGS seal. So thank you very much for that, Audrey. I think there'll be lots of questions, and I don't see any hands up yet, but I think just to make sure that we do not cut short other contributors, I will just hold off on the open Q&A because we are talking a lot. We've got 45 minutes left already. I would like to ask Conrad to please set himself up in his space. Sorry, that was meaning to say, if you can share your screen.
I must stop sharing. Hang on a sec. Sorry about that. It's such a pretty picture.
It's okay, Conrad.
Well, if I share, I will override you. That's how it works. Yes, I will set it up now. I just decided, in the interest of transparency, to actually take away my virtual background so you can see where I actually am, because that's another way that we are often being untransparent when we work virtually, as we put ourselves in this wonderful background.
Virtual reality.
And actually reality is different. So there you go, that's my background. That's a little thing over there was an embroidery that I got in Vietnam from after a PGS visit. So that is actually more real than my other pretty picture of forest flowers in Bonn. Anyway, yes, let me share my screen, and then we'll share that. I think what you will see now is a very non-organic field of canola or rapeseed. But anyway, it's close to my house in Bonn. I fell there with my bicycle the other day after a 60-kilometer cycle, and I'm still struggling. So that's my screen, but now I'll share my presentation, and that will be replaced by my presentation. But Audrey, thanks. Let me just, there we go. So you should be able to see my presentation now. Audrey, thanks so much for that introduction. There's so much of that I remember. It's so much of that coming out of long discussions at Bryanston and so on. So it's really good to see it from another perspective. I'm saying here an interrogation of the 6 basic elements and a few key features. I'm going to come from a slightly different angle to start off with, and I'm going to challenge a few ideas, because what we are seeing in PGS, what is happening, some of this might go into the future webinars as we go along about sustainability and so on. But what we are seeing in PGS at the moment is, in order for the PGS to become more credible, many of our PGS are moving into a more structured paradigm. In other words, they become part of regulation. They work together with government. They are doing they have all sorts of ways of trying to create, sustainability, credibility in a system, and that comes at a cost. And for me, that is a very important thing for us to realize, especially when you are at the beginning of the journey, to understand the big picture, where this came from and where it's going, and how it is actually creating a whole different scenario. And that PGS, there's another important part about PGS, and that is the fact that every PGS is unique and everyone is different, and they don't all look the same. And that is a good thing, that there's a huge diversity, and that we cannot prescribe what a PGS should look like. But certain things need to be there for it to be a PGS. And one of them is the P. The P. If there's no P, there's no participation. Without the P, it's not a PGS, it becomes a GS. And that's not what we want. I had a Mazda some many years ago, it was called the Mazda GS or something. There, look at this picture. This is the picture of the regulated organic world that we find ourselves in at the moment. And what you will see there is that everything that's red is where organic regulations, in other words, government managed, government controlled organic certification is fully implemented. You see some orange bits where it's in progress or not fully implemented. They might have certain parts that are under regulation and others that are not. Then you see a few slightly yellower color. That's where national or regional non-regulated standards are quite active. One can see in South Africa, there's the Sohoso standard and also the STAB standard that has been developed. Zimbabwe, fortunate will know they developed a standard that was used at a voluntary basis. Zambia, the same. East Africa, very well known that they work under the EAOPS, the East African Organic Produce Standard, which is used by many of the active PGS in the region, and so on. But one sees that most of Africa, there's either no data or there's not a lot of information, or there isn't a regulation. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. One can see that regulation is dominated by three areas: North America, Europe, and East Asia. I'm leaving South America out for now. And these are the biggest markets for certified organic. And this is also where everything is most regulated. But what we also know is that the farmers producing the organic crops sit in Africa and South America and Mexico and India. A lot more farmers, millions of farmers sit in these regions, and they're supplying. So the people who are making the rules on the global level, those rules are being followed by farmers living in other parts of the world where there might not be a regulation. So this is one reality. This is the big picture. What we also don't realize is that all these parts, especially Europe, one of the pioneering areas of organic, the way that organic started in Europe was through participatory guarantee systems. In fact, PGS preceded what we now know as third-party certification. It wasn't called PGS. PGS existed before there was a name for it, but PGS was the way that most organic movements did their certification. And here I can include Demeter, I can include Natuurland, I can include Bioland, I can include Nature et Progrès in France. They all used farmer-focused, farmer-driven guarantee systems. The Soil Association in the UK also. Soil Association used to have a chapter in South Africa. These were founder members of IFWAM. They all used participatory approaches, and they evolved towards regulation. Now, the reality here is that this is somehow a thing that happens. Soon as you start making a small rule, rules are very good at replicating and becoming more rules. And PGS, we can also see evolving more and more towards something that looks more regulated. And I think this is where we have to go back to the basic principles. What we are seeing, this is another picture. Some parts of the world, especially Latin America, Mexico, India, Philippines, where I've just been, Madagascar, quite new entrant, countries where PGS is actually included and recognized in the national legislation or regulation. And this is also an interesting development, that it is becoming part of a regulated system. And many of us have been advocating for PGS to be recognized by regulated systems. And this is another interesting thing, and another question that I'm finding, that people in the Philippines, people in Vietnam, people in other parts of the world are actually saying, no, this regulated PGS is not what we thought it would be, and we don't necessarily want to continue with it. The same thing in Brazil. So I just wanted to drop these few ideas in, that what is happening at a global level. And Africa at the moment, because Africa is not generally so regulated, not yet, to Tunisia is regulated. Morocco is regulated. South Africa is moving towards a regulation. I've heard noises in East Africa moving towards regulation. Madagascar just has, and Seychelles, a tiny part of the African Union with 60,000 people, is basically one village, also talking about an organic act. So we still have a chance to look at PGS and look at the thing a little bit differently. There's a lot of PGS activity around the world, especially in Latin America. These pictures, I'm sure you've seen. This is on the iPhone website. It's an interactive map where you can go and look at these different PGS initiatives. Some of them are not very active. Some of them exist on paper. Some of them are very active. Some of them are recognized by their local authorities, especially the green ones that you see in Latin America. So Latin America is an interesting place because it's one of the pioneers of PGS, but it's also where PGS is included in regulations more than anywhere else. So one can see where the older PGS systems are sitting, they become regulated. Now, that is sometimes the PGS groups asking government, please regulate us. We want to be recognized in regulation. The same thing happened in Europe. Europe was not regulated as a European thing. It was regulated maybe by certain countries, but in most countries it was run by the organic sector. The organic sector went to the government and said, please regulate us. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. Sometimes it's not exactly what you thought it would be. So these, we'll come back to this a little bit later, and we could even look at it in the questions. I'm just zooming through it very quickly to give you an idea. This is a slide that I use a lot. It's just to look at different PGS around the world and realize that every logo has a story behind it. And I'm not going to go into all of them. I know some of them are outdated. PGS South Africa, I think the logo has developed recently. That logo might be not quite the current one. Many of these PGS are within a government recognized system, and some of them are outside. But what I wanted to, there's one in the middle here, and this is the one from France, Nature et Progrès. They are a founder member of IFWAM. They have been a PGS since before the 70s, late 1960s. In other words, so that PGS is as old as I am, or yeah, a bit younger than me. But and that PGS still exists, even within and under a regulated system. They still exist, they still practice, they still have a massive support, and that massive support they have from their consumers is not based on the fact that they are regulated, but the fact that they are still a PGS even within a regulated system. And if we have time in another session or so on, I'm very happy to share a bit more about that. But it's just to give a bit of a background on the reality where we are now. And then going back to these 6 basic elements that Audrey was explaining so well. For me, the reason why I choose this picture is from a leadership course I did in the Philippines. It's a small town called Dumingag, a small community, and that's a rice paddy. Is that it's horizontal and it's transparent. It might not be a polyculture, but it is horizontal and it's transparent. And it creates that space where one can have a clear and a shared vision. And to me, there are actually 5 basic elements that you need to have. And Audrey explained them, and I'm not going to go into that in detail. If you have these 5, you have a shared vision, you have active participation of all stakeholders, you have transparency, you see it as not just a control process, but a learning one, and you have horizontality, you have a flat structure. Audrey also said that. Then the 6th element is enabled. The trust becomes apparent. So they are all interdependent. The ones that I want to focus a little bit on today, and I want to interrogate, is the fact that there are 3 that to me at the moment within the evolving of PGS are really challenged. As soon as PGS develops and it becomes more structured, we see a lack of participation or a reduction of participation. We see a increase of control systems and office bearers and functionaries, and we start seeing a hierarchy evolving. And once you lose participation and once you lose horizontality, you also start having a problem with trust. We see it often when PGS evolves that farmers are too busy farming, so they don't want to participate in visits anymore. Consumers say, I'm too busy working for a living, I'm not going to visit farms, so please, you do it on my behalf. You as the PGS committee or as the core group, or you do the farm visit and I will trust your guarantee. And then we appoint people to manage the system. And then these people, there's a power distance that develops. And then horizontality starts becoming a problem. And then transparency, learning, shared vision, all of these become challenged. We constantly have to check ourselves as we evolve. Are we still honoring these principles? Because if we're not, we're just becoming a different version of a third-party system. This trust issue comes up all the time. That people say, oh, how can I trust farmers to check themselves? How can we trust consumers to do the work? We need the experts to do the control. This author, Ernest Hemingway, wasn't a very nice guy, but he was quite interesting. He said, the best way to find out if you can trust someone is to trust them. You can't trust, you can't be convinced that somebody is trustworthy. You have to trust them. If they break your trust, then you can react to that. You can then have a response to them breaking your trust. But the first step you have to make is one of trust. You have to say, okay, I trust you. And then you honor that trust. And if the person breaks the trust, then you have an issue. I think one has to have trust to start. And the more you build a transparent, flat structure that has participation and shared vision, the more the trust will grow. Earlier, something like this, Audrey also talked about. The fact that in order for a PGS to work, it has to have all the components. It can't just have, it has the key features and it has the basic elements that make it work, but it also needs some clear reality in the marketplace. You have to have some demand or a high potential for a local market demand. You have to have active local suppliers with a capacity to produce. You have to have customers asking for a guarantee, and you have to have already, and this is important, there has to be an existing culture of collaboration and ideally a short supply chain. And that also comes later when you're talking about processing and so on. But this idea, and I think it's important to think about that, if you are in an environment where there is conflict, if you are in an environment where there is a lack of trust because there was a breakdown of certain structures and certain maybe even traditional structures, when you're in this kind of flux, it's very difficult to create a PGS. You have to then work, before you even get to making rules about how you grow, you have to work on the culture of collaboration. You have to rebuild, you have to recreate the sense of community. If you have the existing culture of community, then PGS can function. If you don't, it's very difficult for it to function without that. Without, as I say there, a labor of love, without a love for the soil and a love for your neighbor, it's very difficult for the PGS to flourish. So these things are important. Another thing, if we look at this comes straight out of the IFOM training manual, not the picture. I took that at a farm visit in Nepal, I think. PGS are locally relevant. PGS emphasize the participation of stakeholders, including producers and consumers. I find it very often now in PGS that consumers delegate their responsibility. And as soon as they do that, I struggle to see it as let's say, as a fully functional PGS. And then PGS operate outside the framework of third-party certification. It's not a third-party approach. And when it evolves into a third-party approach, it is third-party certification. And I'm not knocking third-party certification. It has a role to play. It has been a very important part of creating the organic sector as it works now. And we see many people trying to get out of the third-party approach, especially at a retail level, because the third-party regulated system means that the big market players cannot dominate too much. They have to follow rules that are not made by them. So they are very hard. I see this with some of these new buzzwords that are coming from the big food corporates, where they are hijacking the concept of regenerative agriculture. And they're saying, oh, we don't want standards. We don't want standards. We only want outcomes. If you do not have a standard and you only have an outcome, then it means you can use any way to achieve the outcome. You can use any method to achieve the outcome. So you could have a regenerative system without standards and then still call your product regenerative is one of the topics. And we're not going to go into that one because it's a very hard one. My point is that third-party certification is not a bad system, but PGS operates outside of that. And it is important that it operates with its own approach. Very, very important to think about that. Then I don't have many slides left, but and some of them now have lots of words, exactly breaking my own rules of training, lots of words, and also what Sasha asked we shouldn't do. I've recently worked a lot in the Philippines. Now, the Philippines very recently recognized PGS in their regulation. They made it part of the regulation, and it was seen by many people as a huge achievement. And it was something that was lobbied for a long time to include it in the regulation. So what we now have in the Philippines looks like this. We have the Department of Agriculture, and there they have within the Agriculture Department, they have the BAFS, which is the Agriculture Standards Authority. And BAFS will accredit third-party organic certification bodies, and they will accredit PGS certification bodies. They will identify a core group of farmers, a small core group, who will be trained and accredited as PGS. Then third-party OCB will inspect and certify. The PGS will peer review and certify. However, the peer that is reviewing is a trained peer and an accredited peer that's part of the PGS OCB, and they will certify. On the one side, an organic operator, on the other side, a farmer member of the PGS. They can then produce their products, they can supply a retailer, or they can supply the market, or they can supply the consumers directly. So when we look at this on paper, we say this is great. It puts PGS alongside third-party systems as an equal participant, being able to supply products, call it organic, and be in line with the Philippine regulation. But look at it carefully, and please explain to me the difference between the one at the top and the one at the bottom. And the similarities are more than the differences. I also would like to remind you of a story called Animal Farm, where at the end, the animals were looking through the window and the pigs and the humans were having a party inside, and you could no longer see who were the pigs and who were the humans. Yes, it's something to consider. And I'm not knocking this. I've worked together with the people in Philippines. We are currently working actively together with them, trying to get more P back into the PGS to say, make it more flexible, make it more open. So this is why I say if we lose some of those key features, if we lose some of the basic elements, or we compromise on them, we complicate, and we might end up in a system that doesn't quite look the way we would like it to look. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm already 6-7 minutes over my time. The other slides I have, I will leave for another session when we talk about the sustainability of PGS. I have a few other slides that go back to the time of when PGS started in Africa, which is around 2005. That's a long time ago. That's 1 year after PGS got a name. Yep. So that's me. That's my story. I'm going to end it there. I'm going to say that we have to look at this and say, when we develop PGS, what are the things we need to think about? What is the true cost of PGS? How do we put the peer back in the review? Do we go for PGS in a regulation? Do we look for PGS beyond organic and look at PGS business model beyond project? All of these are questions that we need to ask. And I think if we stick, if we honor the basic principles, we honor the key elements, then it is more possible to achieve what we are trying to achieve. So there we go. That's it. That's me. I will stop my presentation. Happy that we have a few
Yes, Conrad. Well, thank you so much.
questions and discussions. There we go.
Yes, we will, Conrad. Thank you so much for this presentation and problematizing things, and not necessarily bringing all the answers, but certainly flagging what we need to be cognizant of. We will have a presentation, actually, interestingly, from the PGS in the Philippines. Rowena is one of our speakers lined up for one of the sessions, so she can elaborate on this issue of lack of participation in the design of the PGS.
Yeah, because Rowena, I know exactly where the challenge is. Rowena, they are part of Masipag, the pioneering PGS that were in the Philippines long before there was a regulation. And they are currently struggling with this situation, saying, do we join the regulated system or do we maintain our independence outside of the regulated system? Because if they stay out, they cannot use the word organic because the word organic is regulated. If they go in and they become an OCB, then things look a little bit different to them. Again, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be careful what you wish for. When you go one direction, things can look very different.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Conrad. I think I really want to ensure that there is balance in the time awarded to our contributors. So I'm going to ask Conrad and Audrey, there are questions addressed to you in our Q&A. Go to the bottom of the screen and you can see that there are questions directly addressed to you. Please type in your answer so that everybody can see it. I just want to make sure that any of the questions get addressed if we don't have enough time in the plenary, because we have 20 minutes to go. Olawumi, I would like you to ask you to so long unmute and go ahead with your presentation. Just make sure to unmute, Olawumi, because I had muted you because of the background noise. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sasha. And I would like to share my screen, but before I do that, I kind of find it so difficult to to present in front of my teacher, like when you're sitting with Conrad, and who has taught you over years, and you want to be talking about PGS, then you have to be very careful what you actually say. And for me, when we started this discussion, I began to see it from another angle. And because most of the time when we talk about PGS, we try to talk about PGS and we go away from the organic principles. And so for me, I find it interesting marrying the organic principles with the 6 elements of PGS and trying to see it with a different perspective that they are inseparable and you can't divide them. And so you have to work with the principles to be able to achieve what you need to achieve in PGS. So like we all know, the 4 principles of organic agriculture, which is the core of organic agriculture, whether third party or PGS, or even if you don't have a certification process, the principle of health, the principle of ecology, principle of fairness, and the principle of care. And so importantly, when I look at the learning process for me, and for us in Ghana, we look at the learning process as the principle of health, because it evolves, it's not static, it's something that has to happen over and over and over and again. You can't understand the health of the soil in one day. You can't get to that level that you have a perfect soil in one day. So it's something that you have to do over and over and over again. And that process is a learning process. And so when you're doing that under the principle of health, you are actually fulfilling the PGS element of the learning process. When we look at the principle of ecology, then when we look at the principle of ecology, we look at the shared vision. I look at the shared vision there. And I say, if we look at ecology, we're talking about the entire ecosystem. And so a shared vision talks about collective agreement, collective responsibility. And so when you have a collective responsibility, when we all agree that we want to do something, and then it means that we all are able to keep the environment, we are all able to keep the ecosystem intact, and we are all able to help and sustain this ecosystem, which is the principle of ecology that we all follow in organic agriculture. When we now look at the principle of fairness, where we have more of the elements of PGS, where there also we have the shared vision, we have horizontality, because when you look at the principle of fairness, it talks about equity, it talks about respect, it talks about justice, stewardship. There is no hierarchy in PGS. So when you respect somebody, even though I am a PGS committee member, I still need to respect the farmer needs to respect me. It's a principle that is evolved under the principle of fairness. And so when you're doing this, you are also indirectly following the element of PGS, which is the element of horizontality. And then when we look at transparency, everyone understands how the system functions. It's equity. We all know what to do. We are balanced in the system. Nobody is above each other. Whether it's a male, female, we all work in harmony together. We are actually fulfilling that element of transparency. And Conrad and Hadri has talked so much about participation. Conrad said if there's no P, there's no PGS. And that is the truth. Participation, collective responsibility, which also for me falls under the principle of fairness so much that if you're fair to everybody, if you're fair to your colleagues or your farmers that you work together in a PGS system, then you are going to participate because you will not want to cheat them by not participating. So the principle of fairness will automatically come to place when we all participate. Lastly, when we look at the principle of care, the principle of care talks so much about managing the ecosystem in a precautionary manner. And this is where the element of trust comes to play for me. I look at it from that the integrity of PGS is based on trust. So if I do not trust my fellow farmers, if I do not trust even the system, if I do not trust that we're going to get a market to sell, if I do not trust the process, then I will not think of the future. I will not think of those in the future that needs to benefit, those that needs to, I need to leave the land for them to be able to continue to farm organically. And also under the principle of care, we have the participation and we have the learning process. So I come to think of it that many times when we talk about, as practitioners, we talk so much about PGS and then we leave the principle of organic, assuming that we all understand the principle of organic. But for us in Ghana now, I begin to marry this. And so there's a reflection each time when we talk about PGS, we are talking about the 4 principles of organic agriculture. And so over time, people understand the principles of organic, these principles very well, and they practice it without being without falling out of one, because many times we fall out of the principle of care or the principle of fairness, even though we do the principle of health and the principle of ecology. So this is very important as practitioners that we all have, that we marry these principles. You might reflect with it in another way. You might put all these principles and elements together in another way, but it's very important as we move on in this journey that we marry these principles and the elements together, and then we'll be able to function properly. Thank you so much, Sasha. Over to you.
Olawumi, thank you very much. That was short and sweet, and I think you did a very nice. You did justice to the system, in encapsulating it like you did. And I think the topic of this actually came from you, Olawumi. It was your idea to have the first session round off on this, because you felt it was that we were all on the same page, and yes, flag those things that all PGS groups share in common. So thank you for this very much, Olawumi. You are now basically, because your contribution was a bit shorter, giving us time for the Q&A. So I think if you contributors, including you, Olawumi, can look in the Q&A and see any questions specifically addressed that you can answer in the writing. You can also obviously do it live, but I think if there are hands up, maybe we should go with hearing those questions. Judith, your hand's been up for a while. Do you want to open your mic and ask your question? So Judith, I'm asking you to unmute. Your hand was up. Do you want to speak? Okay. When you're ready, jump in. Audrey, your hand is up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. I just wanted to respond. There was a question, and I can't remember it now, and I can't read it because I've already answered it. But it asked, like, how long do you think a PGS group should be led by a non-farmer? And this is something, it's always worried me when I was at Bryanston, because we had all the resources, we had the computers and the printers and the logistics to take refreshments to farm visits, and we could share transport. So the market had a very big role in sort of supporting the PGS. But I didn't want to lose the horizontality. So that's when I first started doing the mentoring of administrators. So I started with farmers, and then sometimes that once or twice there were people who were not really farmers, but they certainly had the skills to be able to record the information. So I think it is really important, and so you don't have conflict of interest, you don't have any perception that the one sort of the market side is driving the PGS group as opposed to the farmers. I think it's really important, that flat structure. And I would suggest that if you have a market that's supporting you to start, that the first job is to make sure that some of those skills and that you share the experience so that the farmers and others in the group can take over, so that it doesn't become dominated by the farmer. Gabby, I hope I answered that question for you. Thanks.
And then I see Conrad, you wanted to contribute further as well.
Yes, actually, it links directly to that question, because that question was asked in more than one way. In one way, that a non-farmer-led PGS, a non-farmer facilitated or supported PGS, yes. If you look at the old, I don't have that slide now, so I can't show it. If you look at that slide that is used often to explain how a PGS works, it starts with the consumers and the farmers at the top of the slide and the supporting system at the bottom. So the PGS committee or the national PGS, this is Z who asked this question around a structured paradigm of an umbrella organization. The umbrella organization is at the bottom of the system, not at the top. It might hold the umbrella, but to where everybody operates. The idea that you have non-farmers, you have an NGO that manages a lot of the administration of a PGS, that is common around the world and is very successful. Many of the pioneering PGS in India work that way. The Bryanston Market one started with the market doing a lot of the admin. In other words, giving the farmers the space to do what they do best, but also to be part of the farm visit, to be part of leading the discussion and the conversation, but not necessarily doing the paperwork, that somebody does support. I think that is important. So a structured paradigm with an umbrella organization, being part of it, like PGS South Africa is one, PGS India is one. There are a number of these. They are emerging as PGS grows, and it requires it requires some umbrella or some spokesperson or advocate for PGS. But that spokesperson or spokesbody must always remember that it is a support system and not the boss of. I think that's very important. So it goes to both those questions. How does it see itself? It does not replace the farmer in the guarantee, because this is what happens in so many of these hybrid PGS, is that the farmers no longer make the certification decision. The farmers no longer, they might do the peer review, but they're not allowed to make the certification decision. They turn it into a third-party approach where the inspector doesn't certify. Now we are outside a framework of third parties. That's why I think that to me is is key to that. Okay.
Thank you, Conrad. And I just found the poster that PGS is saying recustomized based on that's how it works poster that you were after. And yes, this flow that you describe is here. So thank you for that contribution. I think there's a lot of questions related to governance, and especially in the emerging PGS groups in West Africa, we've heard this question, how does it, what is the best paradigm? And we've heard a lot of these federating bodies acting as actually certifying bodies themselves. And that sort of cuts completely short any participatory elements, and also the context specificness of things. And Audrey speaks so much about this point as well. What works for one PGS group where, they're in touch with their customers and what they're agreeable with might not be the same in another context. So this element of decentralization, I think is important to honor as well. I just want to
there's a very important part of it. A quick comment on that. What has happened with the history of PGS? The first PGS in the world, the old ones, the old pioneers, were managed by quite well-resourced farmers and well-resourced market players. In fact, the Bryanston Organic Market PGS was evaluated by an international NGO working on PGS development in Africa, and said, "Oh, that one is not applicable in Africa because the farmers and the consumers are too well-resourced." I have this on paper. I'll share it next time. My point of that is the reason why it emerged quite quickly as an early PGS is because many of the farmers in that PGS had the resources to get in a car and visit another farm, had the resources to do some of the farm visit work at a time where they had people on the farm working while they are visiting farms. There's a cost there. And the organic market had the resources to do the admin. So the PGS could evolve. When you start with the PGS completely from scratch in an environment, in a community where there's a huge lack of resources, then you need to support it some way, and it's very often through projects. If we look at many of the other PGS in Africa, and this goes into our future discussion around the sustainability of PGS, is that the projects help to pay people to do the work. But then when the money is no longer there to do that and the market hasn't developed sufficiently, then the sustainability is in question. So one has to do so much work to develop the capacity of the community itself, the farmers, the consumers, to be active in that PGS. Otherwise, sustainability is at the question.
And thank you for appetizing us on Module 3, which we'll be touching on that, and to which you'll be contributing, Conrad. I see a question here from Belinda Majani. Belinda, I don't know where you're from, but you asked this interesting question of how can PGS be applied in displacement contexts, which obviously means uprootment and farmers obviously not being in their own farming context. So yeah, this is a new one for me. I don't know, Olawumi, Conrad, Audrey, what this inspires to you.
Yeah, it's again, it goes towards what is the function of your PGS. I think generally speaking, where you have a breakdown of certain structures in the community, where people are displaced, when people are in conflict, when things are not in balance, it adds a different dynamic that the PGS cannot solve everything. A PGS is not a panacea. It cannot fix every problem. It needs certain things to grow. You can't, well, you can grow plants without soil, but you bloody well shouldn't. But you cannot, you need a few key elements. So operating in an area of conflict or displacement, I've had this discussion with people working from Syria, people working in parts of the Middle East where there's a lot of conflict, a lot of displacement, and how does this work? It's not easy. One has to create some support system or some kind of haven for it to work. I think that, yeah, there are certain things you might say the space is not ready for it. There's something else that has to precede in the development before it's ready for PGS. PGS can do a lot of things, but it can't do everything.
Thank you, Conrad. I see two last comments here, and our time on the webinar. Oh no, we still have a bit of time. Sorry, I'm thinking to the top of the hour, but we're still good to go with more questions. So Berta Nrera asked for some clarity. A PGS group pays a national certifying board, or is it just farmers working on their own? So I think this answer will depend on the specific PGS governance, right? I'm looking now at the bottom of the chat box. I just want to take this one for the South African context. The way we've designed things, Berta, is that we have PGSSA, which is like sort of the umbrella body of the different PGS groups. It federates them, it supports them, it does not dictate things. It just acts as a kind of like an assurance body of the PGS groups. It receives a membership from the PGS groups that are that qualify according to our requirements. What we ask PGS groups is to send information about their status. They must complete a self-evaluation form, which is just speaking about their progress in honoring the PGS principles. We need a database of their farmer members so that we can also track and map the growth of the organic sector in the country, and their standard operating procedures. The groups that are market ready, who are generating income, we do ask for a membership fee as well. So that is at the level of the PGS group paying a membership fee to PGSSA, and then each PGS group decides how they want to manage their membership. Some of them say you don't need to pay us anything. Some PGS groups demand a small fee to be paid to them by their farmers. Olawumi, maybe you want to discuss how it works in your context.
Yeah, it's so different from because when we started, it was under the OM for the project, and the project designed what it wanted to achieve. And so we were following what the project wanted to achieve, but the reality isn't what was happening on the ground. And then also because I'm sure Conrad was involved in OM40, and also because at the beginning in Ghana, the country wanted a national PGS, which for me, I know it's not going to work. You can start with a national PGS in a country like Ghana with diverse culture and norms and belief. And so it was quite not difficult managing this system. So ever since the project phase ended, my opinion has been that each group should start, any country that is going to start should start with groups. Let the groups have their dynamics, let them play around these elements, let them walk around it themselves, let them express how they want it to be done. And then as they come to a better understanding year in, year out, because even we that we are leaders, we're still evolving, we're still learning. Each day I'm learning in PGS. So they begin to understand on a larger perspective, and then they begin to bring themselves together by themselves. And that way, the national, the regional, because we have an issue also in West Africa, for example, they want to have a West Africa, you know, Sasha, West Africa PGS. And they're like, these are crazy ideas. They are very good, but it doesn't start like that. We're still building this hierarchy where we do all this. Let's do a lot of, we say in organic biodiversity, let's diversify, let's be strong at the base, and then let's begin to build and come together, as many that can come together. And then we can really function very well and grow the organic sector. Conrad showed the map, and you know, for me, when I look at that map all the time, I look at Africa and I'm like, where are we? Even for us, what do we eat in Africa? Are we actually eating organic? For example, in Ghana, I would say no. We have moved away from organic totally. We are eating inorganic food. So the base has to be mended before we start talking about other things. Yes.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
I can just echo what Olawumi is saying. I think that the challenge is that, and I, as a PGS pioneer and went around the world training people in PGS for the last 15 years, at one stage, I looked at myself, I said, I must stop this. I must stop doing this because I am transferring a model of PGS to people. I just had it, a PGS in Japan, a guy in Japan who found our questionnaire of Bryanston Organic Market, our PGS questionnaire. He found it on the internet. And he developed a PGS in Japan following our system to the letter. And he got his PGS eventually approved and recognized by IFORM. Great achievement. However, I just felt, no, this is not the way. How can my PGS questions developed in Africa be relevant to Japanese farmers? Yes, they can be inspired by it, but it doesn't make sense to copy paste the ideology in that way. I think it's so important that it has to be bottom up, it has to evolve. I think the challenge comes with the fact that the organic market is now developed to a point where there is a market, there is demand, and people want to fast track their guarantee system to match that perceived value. So they start top down. IFORM became a champion of PGS. So IFORM started developing descriptions of what a PGS should look like and how the PGS should function and what are the key features and the 10 basic elements. All of these things were great and we all use them in our training, but they already prescribe to people what the PGS should look like. It's a catch-22. The pioneers are no longer pioneers, they have moved on. The same thing happened with certified organic. The pioneers started as rebels of the soil. They started out as rebels. All the big companies, big organic companies started as rebels. And as they develop, they become more structured and structured up to the point where they sell their company to Nestle or to Coca-Cola. You know how many organic companies Nestle and Coca-Cola owns? Lots. Now, that's where it ends up. it's kind of a natural progression, but it's also one that we should be very careful of. And so I absolutely agree with Olawumi when it says, let it develop itself bottom up as far as you can, and let the NGO or the NOAM, the National Organic Agriculture Movement, play a facilitation role, not a controlling role. Many of the PGS in Africa and other parts function as a certification system run by the National Organic Agriculture Movement. People apply to become PGS certified. They pay the NOAM. The NOAM comes out, inspects them, and says, you are now part of the PGS. Yep. This is how it is actually functioning. This is not really PGS. This is a certification system. It's a guarantee system. It might be a very good one, but it's not a PGS.
And it's got its shortcomings as well, because it might function in certain contexts where there's donor funding, but as soon as that donor funding dries up, you'll find that the centralized model is the first victim of like not being able to conduct farm visits anymore, because the tremendous costs attached with sending people to the countryside. It needs to be localized.
Exactly.
Olawumi, your hands up. Do you want to come in again?
No. I just wanted to say that this conversation is so huge and it's so necessary at this time in the whole context of PGS within Africa. Because I'm quite involved in a lot of PGS within Africa. So I would like to say, Sasha, that I'm just thinking about it for this workshop that is going to last in August. Probably we'll set up a WhatsApp or a Telegram, and then we bring Conrad, we bring Adri, we bring the speakers. They come into that group and the discussions continue. People ask questions because there are burning questions in the heart of people that they can't even ask in their country, but they want to ask from experts or people that have been leading the process over years and get clarity. Because for me, the big picture is that we evolve in Africa and we grow, and we grow PGS, we grow organic in Africa. So I'm throwing that to you. So if it's something that we can do and it can be managed well, we can set a few terms and conditions, rules, time that things should be posted, and then people can really contribute into this flow. And then we know that over the next 2-3 months that we're going to be having this series of webinars. And at the end of the webinar, then we close it and people can save all those information at their personal data.
So Olawumi, you're suggesting an Africa-wide PGS chat group.
Yeah. Yeah, we are all, it's all Africa that is here. So let's keep the conversation alive. Because there's so much to learn. Conrad and Audrey, they've been in this field for years. There's so much to tap from them. And so this is a good opportunity to have this clear understanding of what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and then we can move forward.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I think there's huge appetite for that. Sylvain in the chat box is also underlining this need to initiate multiple, hybrid sessions engaging on PGS. There's a lot of questions in the chat box asking about the recordings. So these recordings will be found on 2 platforms. The one being the PGS's website. We're happy to offer the space where we're trying to accumulate as many resources possible on PGS practice. It's still the beginning. We are still laying out that space, and Ntati is driving this beautifully. You will see in the resource tab there that we're going to be uploading the videos and the PowerPoints related to this webinar series. So you can go on the PGS foundational tab and you will see that things are itemized there. And then there's another platform where things are going to be uploaded, is on the Organic Knowledge Hub platform. And maybe Colleen, you can come in here to assist, please, with the specific link to this platform, because I don't have it offhand. The products of the webinar series will be uploaded there as well, because we are organizing this webinar series under the banner of the Knowledge Hub for South Africa, of which for Southern Africa, pardon me, of which South Africa is part. So this is a kind of like a partnership, and PGS Ghana is a partner in this, and we're trying to also see how we can involve our colleagues from the West African hub. So yeah, this is where you're going to be able to see some the resources uploaded. I'm just looking at the chat or at the Q&A box. If there's any other questions, please also feel welcome to just raise your hands and ask your question live. We're happy to see people also express themselves directly. Wrong web page link. Okay, let me, Belinda, let me check my right page link.
No, that's me. That was me. Sorry, I put KCOA online, but it's actually KHSA online. I thought it was under the KCOA banner, but it's not. It's KHSA online.
So khsa.online, and there will be many other resources that go beyond now what we're doing under the banner of PGS. There was another point that I see Fortunate made earlier on in the chat box, which related to the involvement of consumers, which is also something that's really like topical for today. You know, like, are we honoring the principles of PGS if we don't have participation from the consumers, which, you know, we all agree is a critical element required. So I don't know if Audrey, Lawumi, Conrad, do you have, you know, some nuggets of wisdoms and best practice in terms of, you know, how do we go about involving consumers more? Because I think many PGS groups are saying this, that sometimes it's difficult to get consumers on board. Yeah.
Many, I will kick off and then they can take over. Many PGS have that problem. And some of the pioneering PGS, like in India, you have one of the pioneers of PGS, which is Last Forest Products. Their logo was also on that slide of mine. Now, Last Forest worked with indigenous communities very, very far away from the marketplace. They work with honey harvesters and people working, tribal communities working in the Nilgiri Hills in the middle of India. And their products are sold in the cities. So consumers are nearly never directly involved with that PGS. However, they function very well with an NGO doing so much of the administrative work with the tribal communities, helping them to set up retail space and also managing the retail environment. And consumers are invited. Consumers sometimes come on farm visits, and they come and stay in the guest house, and it becomes a whole agritourism experience. And in that way, they are somehow involved, but not regularly and not all the time. But also remember that a primary retailer, let's say you have a market, Bryanston Market is a good example. Bryanston Market and other PGS where the farmers are selling maybe to a small retailer or to a local retail shop, and that retailer is a representative of the consumer. They are consumer facing. So there are ways of making this work, even if you don't get all the direct consumers on every farm visit. You constantly have to make it as transparent as possible, get them to participate virtually if you can. You know, I'm no longer on Facebook, thank heavens, for a long time now, but you know, you can use social media to promote your farm visits, to show it to the consumers, and that there is at least some way to get them involved. But it isn't possible in all PGS. It is not possible, especially if you're working in very rural areas. So there has to be a hybridized approach.
Yeah, Conrad, I'll just come in there as well, is that I had very good success in Bryanston with bringing in consumers because of that very close relationship between the customers that were coming in specifically to buy the organic produce, and over time developed relationships. And in Cape Town, I'm finding there are lots of tourists here. The people seem to be busier, but every now and again, I come across one of those customers that understands how important the food system is and that is really interested in You know, I tell customers, I said, your power is where you're going to put your money, where you're going to buy it today. And those customers that engage in that kind of discussion, they'll come with you. I mean, it's tricky because like during the week, they're often working and we've got markets on the weekend. But I think that in a lot of those markets, you'll find those very committed customers. And then also, I think in the rural areas, any organization, so like if you've got a clinic, invite the nurses to come with to look to, you know, because they know all about nutrition and food. So spread out to other organizations in your area and get those people involved, and they're also consumers. And then as can't think of who it is, maybe it's Alan Rosenberg, he said, but farmers are also consumers. So, you know, we are all have that role in the PGS system as well. But it is a problem, it is difficult. Thanks.
Thank you, Audrey. I would do Linda had a hand up for your question. And Mark is
Sasha has moved to
connected.
Mars.
Is connection bad?
Yeah, we can hardly hear you.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I was just inviting Belinda to speak.
Hey, Brian, the meeting one. Be quiet. No, we don't. Oh, now what about me?
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Sasha. We lost you. Okay, Belinda. Belinda, do you have a question? But it's so noisy where you are. It's noisy, so you might, yeah, you might have to type the question. Well, I'm sorry, I might have to, yeah. Can you please type the question, please? Yeah. So, Sasha, Nati, is Sasha back?
I don't know. I mean, no, I'm just trying to get her back.
Oh, okay.
We seem to have lost
Belinda,
Sasha.
you can still see. No, there's a hand raised. Belinda, if you can ask your question directly, fine. If not, you can put it in the group page, and like suggested to Sasha, we will end up or a WhatsApp group that will open for this period of time, and then we can keep the conversation there. We can keep the questions coming, and then we can actually clear a lot of doubts and a lot of issues that have been holding us back in actually progressing in PGS. Audrey, you have a comment, last comment, because we're
nearly on time. Just quickly, there was a comment in the chat box from Mazie around he's seen very negative effects on PGS working with NGOs. And I just wanted to bring up something else. You know, some of the farmers who are they've got a business model. They're looking at their margins. They're looking at the cost of all their inputs. They're trying to make a business of their farm. And then they're competing against an NGO supported project or farm. and they've got funders and they've got managers they can hire to run this, and labor that they can hire, and money for all of the inputs. And so you have an uneven playing field. So interestingly enough, when you're dealing in organic agriculture, often you find that people working in those sectors are very caring and humane people. So there's one NGO I'm working with, they're always checking what the prices are out there, what organic prices are going for. They never undercut the organic prices that the farmers are getting, because they do their research. So there is a consciousness among some NGOs of, you know, playing fairly there. But Mizzy, I hear you that it's the same with what Gabby's comment around markets. You know, you don't want the domination to be from an NGO or from a market. Thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Audrey.
sorry.
Conrad, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a very fine balance here. I've also been, in my presentation, challenging the idea of top-down structured PGS, and we're talking about emergent properties. NGOs are often in this position where they are really sometimes the pioneers in identifying something that works and then trying to replicate. Finding something somewhere in the world like PGS and replicating it. My erstwhile employer, IFOM, was one of those, becoming a champion for PGS, but then at the same time also using this as one of their key activities, and this becomes then an NGO-driven approach. And NGOs and markets are always in some kind of imbalance, because the one is about working in a public sphere with public money, and the idea of profit and market should not enter into the discussion. It is not allowed. An NGO is not supposed to make a profit, while farmers should make a profit. Profit is the bounty. When you have a tree, trees make profit all the time. It only needs one seed to replicate itself. All the other seeds are profit. It's bounty. Bounty is part of the system to have, to be able to be entrepreneurial, to make a profit, to earn more than you spend. And NGOs are designed to spend what they earn, and sometimes even more. But to knock them is also a dangerous thing. NGOs can often come and do training, facilitation, support. It is just to manage that approach well, that how can the NGO community, the funded community, really facilitate the development of a market system. That market system development approach balanced with the NGO approach, because the NGO becomes a business model in its own right. And this again goes to our future discussion about sustainability of PGS. But I think it is, we don't knock it, but be cognizant of the fact that NGO can find itself in this double bind.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I would like to say a big thank you to Conrad, and a big thank you to Audrey for your good work and for leading this webinar today, and for the great conversation that we've had. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone that has joined today. Thank you so much for making out your time to join this webinar, and to have the inspiration that PGS will work in Africa and grow. So I would like to remind us that the next webinar will be on the 28th of June, same time, 10:30 a.m. Ghana time, GMT. I don't know how it applies to wherever you are. I know in South Africa it's 12:30. So depending on where you are around the world, please, we'll keep sharing the information. Let as many farmers join, let as many leaders join, let the information go around so that all of us are well informed, all of us are well equipped for the knowledge, and then we can all grow together. On this note, we'd like to close today's session. I would like to say bye-bye to everyone and see you some other time. Bye. Bye, Conrad. Bye, Audrey. Sister. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Stan.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye bye.